But it's not about fairy tales and mythologies. Imagination can take you to wonderful places. Your imagination can relieve your pain. Your imagination can help you work out things about the world that you may not know.
On either side, there are garlands of large, heavy fruit. And when we look carefully at the fruit, we can see that it casts shadows on the picture, as if the painting were behind it, as if the garlands were three-dimensional objects hanging between the picture frame and the painting. Crivelli has created an additional space in his picture, somewhere between the frame and the image of Gabriele having his vision. This space separates us from the picture, in the same way that the mandola separates the friar from his vision. It marks out a different territory. We are both close to the friar and his vision and distant from them. He is both close to the Virgin and Child and separated from them. The Virgin and Child can project forwards out of their mandola into the friar's world. Can we, the viewers, project forwards out of our world into the picture? Like Verrocchio, Crivelli is issuing a theological challenge in a visual form. The painting asks us, how close can we get to God? Can we see God? What kind of revelation, what kind of insight into the divine might we be privileged to receive? These aren't questions to which we can give definitive answers. And these paintings are, I think, deliberately inconclusive. They leave us in an ambiguous place, one step removed, wondering if we can ever cross the threshold and see the vision for ourselves.
About. And this is huge because it turns out that ideas are just as real as the neurons they inhabit, as James Gleick tells us. A new kingdom rises above the biosphere. The denizens of this kingdom are ideas, because ideas have retained some of the properties of organisms, it turns out. They leap from brain to brain. They compete for the limited resources of. They have infectivity. They have spreading power. They are what Richard Dawkins calls the new soup of human culture. Their vector of transmission is language and electronic communications. And though ideas are not made of nucleic acid, they have achieved more evolutionary change, and at a rate that leaves the old gene panting far behind. Ray Kurzweil says our ability to create virtual models in our heads, combined with our modest-looking thumbs, was sufficient to usher in the secondary force of evolution called technology. And it will continue until the entire universe is at our fingertips. This is unbelievable stuff. It speaks to the telescopic nature of evolutionary change. More change in the last 100 years than in the last billion years. Terence McKenna actually wrote that from the moment that human beings invented language, biological evolution essentially ceased, and evolution became a cultural epigenetic phenomenon. Now, we take in matter of low organization, we put it through our mental filters, and we extrude it in the form of space shuttles and iPhones. The Imaginary Foundation tells us that what
We saw earlier that few poor people are consistently poor over a 4-year period, maybe 3% of the population. Well, 2/3 of that group have one or more disability. Lesson 7 is that disability must be foregrounded in our thinking about poverty much more than
years old, and plants and herbs that are a gift from Mother Nature. This is the birthplace of Jamila, a woman who experienced the exceptional power of nature at a very young age.
Because we all know that those are not safe places to live, right? The only trick is that you've got to identify the best, worthiest thing that you love most and then build your house right on top of it and don't budge from it. And if you should someday, somehow get...
This is the first time 5 blinded vets are kayaking down the Grand Canyon.
I stare into a still, dark world, and that can make you want to be stagnant. And it's not what I want to be. I want to move.
We developed this simple system for kayaking blind.
My primary guide leading me is creating this verbal reference point.
Whatever noise I make, they try to follow me. Essentially,
Thanks. These questions are very confronting, right? These questions are basically, I'm sort of punching you in the heart in a loving way and saying, this is your life. You have to be responsible. If you don't want to answer the questions and you want to blame everybody,
they are life. Knowing that time is the most valuable thing we have, and it only moves forwards. This is your life. Know it while you have it.
Workers are the most important labor force on the streets of the city for 3 reasons. They are the first guardians of public health. If they're not taking away trash efficiently and effectively every day, it starts to spill out of its containments, and the dangers inherent to it threaten us in very real
each other. Our crazy selves are living with each other and perpetuating an epidemic of disconnection. Let's live with each other and take it a breath at a time. If we can get under that heavy self, light a torch of awareness.
My first memories are from the boat. The steady beat of the engine, the bow dipping into each wave, the vast and empty horizon. I don't remember the pirates who came many times but were bluffed by the bravado of the men on our boat, or the engine dying and failing.
Space are totally invisible for all practical purposes. But early on, when the universe was making that last afterglow, the gravitational waves put little twists in the structure of the light that we see. So by looking at the night sky deeper and deeper, in fact, these guys spent 3 years.
An existential threat. I mean, these are aggressive statements. And so you're seeing people starting to create a bigger social movement, because we need that too. For a change this big, it isn't just business or government, but citizens need to be involved. Recently, in New York City, there was a very large climate march. I took part with my family, and me and 400,000 of
increases of my salary are going to work. I think that in the future my salary might be structured differently because my job has a sales focus to it. I do have a little bit of a commission, and that I've included in my salary of $42,000. So it can fluctuate depending on
that are going to reduce the vulnerability. If we can't make adjustments, then who can?
So you're not to think of yourself simply as an individual, but rather as someone embedded in a society who has responsibilities towards the future and somewhat to the past. And conservatives also have an idea that we don't just live as individuals, we live. And And what you are is the work of previous generations. Therefore, your responsibility is to pass all of this on to the next generation. So you're not to think of yourself simply as an individual, but rather as someone embedded in a society.
The political and media system, that there are things you can't really do?
Well, American leadership, in part, comes out of our can-do spirit. We're the largest, most powerful country on earth. As I said previously in speeches,
New York mayors are considering that idea of how you can actually constitute a global parliament of mayors. And I love that idea because a parliament of mayors is a parliament of citizens, and a parliament of citizens is a parliament of us, of you and of me. If ever
architect, I'm creating the space where people are willing and able to share and combine their talents and passions. So if some of you are worrying now that you don't work at a Pixar or you don't work at a Google, I want to tell you there's still hope. We studied many organizations that were really not organizations you think
are developing incredible Internet of Things technologies to fulfill the theme of improving healthcare in countries where more people now have access to cell phones. And among them is Arthur Zhang. He's a young Cameroonian design engineer.
So the next time any of you are looking at a broken down, malfunctioning piece of crap technology, I want you to think of me. Because I want it. So seriously, please find any way to get in touch.
When people are following your work, and like you said, you know, like what is maybe singing is a very vulnerable thing for you, but
yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think there's a lot of factors that went into that. I mean, you know, one of them is just like, you know, what I was interested in. Started, you know, from when movement came out to today, I feel like people have shifted their perspective. People are more open to things. I feel like, you know, genres are more smashed together. I feel like pop isn't as dirty of a word as it was several years ago. It's funny, I was at Unsound a couple weeks ago. I feel like, you know, genres are more smashed together. I feel like pop isn't as dirty of a word as it was several years ago. It's funny, I was at Unsound a couple weeks ago, and it's like everyone was smiling and dancing. Not that people weren't smiling at Unsound 3 years ago, but it was definitely
Americans. Yeah, there are several startling statements in your report. This is one of them. Our current tax system encourages multinationals to invest abroad and create jobs abroad, as you just said. And yet, these are people who defend their practices by saying we are the job.
Physical benefits of oxytocin are enhanced by social contact and social support. So when you reach out to others under stress, either to seek support or to help someone else, you release more of this hormone, your stress response becomes healthier, and you actually recover faster from stress.
Next few minutes, I'm going to show you how mentors are more powerful than you can possibly imagine in their ability to transform your life. It's interesting that I'm here in Luxembourg because my grandmother was born not too far from here in Berlin, Germany. She's 96 years old, by the way, and she said, "Ty, tell them hello."
Not that I think a lot of, you know, teenagers are fresh out of high school. It's a very vulnerable time, and I had always been very, very shy in my lifetime. I couldn't make eye contact with people. I have a very soft-spoken voice because I just never really thought that what I had to say.
Really bringing forward who you are. If you're coming from your ego self, you're coming from a self that you manufactured in order to survive the gauntlet of life, and it's not a genuine or comfortable or truly available self.
Tradition and habit than we are with a better way of doing things.
Right. Well, it was out of California that Congressman Waxman, in collaboration with Massachusetts Congressman Ed Markey, now Senator Ed Markey, developed a carbon tax platform that, in the wake of the healthcare reform,
Continue to swim upstream against the grain of who you are, or you surrender to that voice. It feels, for some initially, like it's just a free fall. It's just so threatening to the construct of your work.
Person doing this, and there are people that I can look back and be inspired by, and be proud that I'm following in this lineage of creativity, that it's not just about me, it's about all those that came before me and all those that are going to come after me. I think that's what theater teaches you.
The eternal, timeless, and limitless self that we all are. And when we lose touch with that, we start looking for ourselves in the reflections of the world around us, people and approval and standard.
Who are in other classes where it's not structured as socially, where you're just like sitting in classes, and theater's really more about like talking to people and getting to know people, and I really like that. You have fun and like you learn skills that will help you in all your other classes as well. So I would say go for it, even if you're nervous.
Nationally.
As you point out, cancer vaccines are in the future, and they could be very effective. Checkpoint blockade, which is activating your immune system to recognize those cancer cells and kill them, is another.
Not crazy. It tells you that you're not making it up, that other people are seeking the same deeper answers, deeper sense of being. So it gives you confidence. And two, it gives you direction. You actually begin to become educated. That there
Team. Now, when we're talking about Latino, African American, Asian minority students, you learn the history of what we've done in theater and in the arts movement. You can learn that in theater. I learned about the Federal Works Project and the vaudeville and the
and travel are so discursively entangled, so discursively intimate, that we use the same metaphors and analogies to describe the subjective experiences of each. I mean, even the term hallucination derives from the
We have the capacity to decide at every moment who we are and where we're going, right? That is what we do. Except when you look deeper, you actually find that mind, okay, that consciousness is in fact not necessarily autonomous from the world in which it dwells. In other words, world are now allowing us to overlay digital information on top of the physical world. They have apps already that, looking through the camera in the app, you can place virtual elements into real environments. So it's this notion that you're mapping the real world and overlaying agency, information, gamification. Celebrated enough in our society, because these are the people that allow us to design cities, spaces, and dwellings in which we unfold, right? And if anything, architects should work together with psychologists and with designers who understand the impact of shapes, shadows, and forms upon human subjectivity, right? Design matters. Primates, but when we work together, we are primates that can fly. Hey guys, you want to take a look at shots of all behind the scenes, how it all comes to life? Well, then check out this episode I shot on
part of who we are, and those that believe that technology is fundamentally unnatural and that it's a tool that's being used to ultimately destroy the world. I don't fall into that camp. I echo Kevin Kelly's ideas that stipulate that actually technology is the
we want to put into force, that we are also negotiating effectively with the entire EU around the transatlantic trade agreement, or TTIP, and those negotiations are proceeding. And so
there are some pretty common responses. Inexperience, fear, maybe hesitation, time management. These are obstacles we all have to overcome, right? Certainly they're all valid, they're all very real. And I recently took this question, spent some time with it, in terms of my own
growing of focus, right? We are told that biochemically no different than doing lots and lots of cocaine. We become addicted to the other person, and we use that as a means to dismiss the authenticity of that feeling, as a way of somehow saying it is not worthy of our attention because it's right, that we are cognitive beings. We are creatures of mind. We have natural inquiry embedded in our bones, right? Curiosity defines us. We are the frontal lobes of the universe. But it's also said that in life, happiness comes not from finding the answers, but in seeking. Can influence perception to the degree that who and what we are is determined by where we are and where we dwell. The wallpaper matters, right? What is within is without, what is without is within. We're like the dragon eating its own tail. We're the Ouroboros, okay? We're Escher's hands. We are transformed, we are reset, and we are filled with feelings of grace and gratitude. This kind of awe therapy made possible by these technological instruments such as space telescopes enlarge us, right? They bewitch us, and they, oh my God, right, are said to have this thing known as a reality distortion field, right? Steve Jobs was made famous for it. His ability to distort, to italicize perception in his coworkers, right? To inspire somebody to see the world in a new way, right? To literally engage the attention. So when we are hallucinating, we are traveling in our heads, right? Why travel? Well, the hero's journey, right? This map that describes a departure from the ordinary, leaving normal thoughts behind, treading forth in a new environment, dealing with.
the seams are showing a little more than usual in terms of some of the negotiations and jostling that takes place behind the scenes. And in fairness, when delegations travel to the United States, sometimes there are issues about our security procedures.
I mean, some people are scared it's going to create idiocracy and we're all going to be numbed into stupors, but I don't think so. I think we're all going to be hand-delivered universes that extend our imagination to spaces and places and virtualities we cannot even imagine. I think the games are going to get better, and I think we are like Neo in the Matrix when he sees the code and he flexes his muscle and space and time warps around him. Powerful metaphor, but that's who we are, that's what we are.
When I bring up issues like human rights, there are some tensions there that perhaps don't take place when President Xi meets with other leaders, but that's part of our job.
Come to wonder, are we living in a world where wonder is expressed more intensely because any time I wonder about something I can look up the answer? Or is the immediacy with which the answer is available actually dulling us into a state where we rarely experience the rapture of the search, right? Not just the destination, but the journey. Tissue, they are nonetheless a part of our cognitive arsenal. They are a part of us the same way a nest is a part of a bird and a spider's web is a part of the spider. Yet are we offloading the simple questions to the noosphere and making room for new things we haven't even thought of yet? I mean, I like to think so because I'm an optimist, you know. Unlike Socrates, who felt that the invention of writing would atrophy our brains because we wouldn't have to remember anything if we wrote it down, so too people were.
Be complacent. We know these terrorists are intent on destroying our way of life, and the threat in the UK remains severe. So as we drive Daesh out of one area, we must be alert to the risk that they will seek a safe haven elsewhere, and we must work internationally to defeat their ideology of hatred.
What we are, so that we may expand, transcend, transform. And there's a wonderful idea popularized by Kevin Kelly known as finite and infinite games. Now, Finite and Infinite Games is a book by religious scholar James P. Carse, and Kevin Kelly, who co-founded Wired magazine, has praised it for altering my appendages that even though they are not within our biological skin tissue, they are nonetheless a part of our cognitive arsenal. They are a part of us the same way a nest is a part of a bird and a spider's web is a part of the spider. It is our extended phenotype. It is who we are. They are a part of us the same way a nest is a part of a bird and a spider's web is a part of the spider. It is our extended phenotype. It is who we are. It is our termites colony. It is temperature controlled. It is the extension of our mindedness. This is technology. This is the technium, the seven.
Unrealized capital gains are not taxed as long as the owner keeps them, right? Doesn't get rid of them.
That's right. And it's even worse if you're a corporation and you even realize the capital gains, but you're abroad, you don't bring the money.
Buy things.
Exactly. Americans of all income groups are entrepreneurial. You got people across our income distribution who, when there's a demand, respond to that demand. But if there's no demand, there won't be jobs. Now the problem is that the people in the 1%
about artists who are also working in areas of digital activism and software development. I know I keep talking about Matt Dryhurst, but I'm going to bring it up again. He just released a piece of software called Saga that's all around kind of this idea of self-hosting and artists having their own agency of the work.
Are down from 40% in 1943 to just below 10% in 2012. All this as some of the largest and richest corporations are now resorting to legal hanky-panky that allows them to renounce their citizenship, meaning they can pretend.
Are also the countries that score highest on the happiness scale. And that's not just because they're all in Europe. Even within Europe, those countries that are more gender equal also have the highest levels of happiness. It is also good for companies.
Because the people they work with are their neighbors, because like Mayor Booker in Newark, a mayor is likely to get out of his car on the way to work and go in and pull people out of a burning building. If that happened to Mayor Booker, or intervene in a mugging in the street as he
types. All of these designers and many more are pursuing their dreams by making the most of their newfound freedom with the discipline of professional designers and the resourcefulness of rebels and renegades, and we all stand to benefit. Thank you.
Because if you are going to embody disembodied Western rationality, you need a signifier. And what could be a better signifier of disembodied Western rationality than a garment that at one end is a noose and the other end points to the genitals?
So instead, we target those areas where HIV rates are the highest. We know in certain countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we can test and treat pregnant women where rates are highest. This precision approach to a public health problem.
And sea levels are likely to rise between 2 and 10 feet by century's end. I have dedicated my career to illuminating these projections with an accessible medium, one that moves us in a way that statistics may not.
In Africa, we can test and treat pregnant women where rates are highest. This precision approach to a public health problem has cut by nearly half HIV transmission from mothers to baby in the last 5 years.
Chef. Computer-generated movies are really mainstream today, but it took Ed and his colleagues nearly 20 years to create the first full-length CG movie. In the 20 years hence, they've produced 14 movies, and I was recently at Pixar, and I'm here to tell you that number 15 is sure to be a winner.
Now, some of my favorite examples of this are in Africa, where a new generation of designers are developing incredible Internet of Things technologies to fulfill Florence Nightingale's dream of improving healthcare in countries where more people now have access to cell phones than to clean running water.
That they come up with when they're working on a particular scene. So if you think about that scene in Up, where the boy hands the piece of chocolate to the bird, that 10 seconds took one animator almost 6 months to perfect. The other thing about a Pixar movie is that no part of the movie is considered
California are locked in all kinds of anger, resentment, and rivalry for number one. We heard more about who will be number one. Cities don't worry about number one. They have to work together, and they do work together. They work together in climate change, for example.
And if any problems are spotted by the specialist there, a suitable course of treatment is recommended. And this, of course, saves many patients from making long, arduous, expensive, and often pointless journeys to those hospitals, and makes it much, much likelier that their hearts will.
Thus, the volumes of Earth history are incomplete and disheveled. The library is vast and magnificent, but decrepit. And it was this tattered complexity in the rock record that obscured its meaning until relatively recently.
That babies are dying because of a bacterial infection transferred from the mother to the baby, known as Group B streptococcus. In the absence of treatment, mom has a 7 times higher chance that her next baby will die. Once we define the
who are also pursuing extraordinary projects of their own, and I'm going to finish by looking at just a few of them. One is Peak Vision. This is a group of doctors and designers in Kenya who've developed an Internet of Things technology of their own as a portable eye examination
space where people are willing and able to do the hard work of innovative problem solving. So, at this point, some of you may be wondering, well, what does that leadership really look like? Well, at Pixar, they understand that innovation takes a village. So the leaders focus on building.
Even within Europe, those countries that are more gender equal also have the highest levels of happiness. It is also good for companies, Research by Catalyst and others has shown conclusively that the more gender equal companies are,
but the babies born during a production are listed there. And how did Bill think about what his role was? Bill said, I lead a volunteer organization. Talented people don't want to follow me anywhere. They want to co-create with me the future.
There are, of course, other technical details to the blockchain, but at its core, that's how it works. It's this public registry that stores transactions in a network and is replicated so that it's very secure and hard to tamper with. Which brings me to my point.
Dinosaurs are too often portrayed as passive, lumbering platters of meat on the landscape. They're not. Big herbivores can be surly and they can be territorial. You do not want to mess with a hippo or a rhino or a water buffalo. The bison in Yellowstone.
Data from psychologists and sociologists are quite persuasive here. I think we have the persuasive numbers, the data to prove to men that gender equality is not a zero-sum game, but a win-win. Here's what the data show. Now, when men begin the process,
because there are many other inspiring and enterprising designers who are also pursuing extraordinary projects of their own. And I'm going to finish by looking at just a few of them. One is Peak Vision. This is a group of doctors and designers in Kenya who've developed an Internet of Things.
We are essentially trying to build a more awesome government for the people, by the people, today. We don't care. Thank you. Who doesn't want a more awesome government, right? We don't care about politics. We care about making government work better because it's the only one It's often the hardest things that are the most worth doing. Because if we don't do them, who will? This is on us, all of us, together, because government is not an abstract institution or a concept. Our government is us.
We're unaware of things that are too small for us to see. The electron microscope fires electrons, which creates images which can magnify things by as much as 1,000,000 times. This is the egg of a butterfly. And there are unseen creatures living all over your body, including mice.
I'm proud to say that they are live on the site today, and as the team continues to streamline more services, they will be ported over here and the old sites will be shut down. To me, this is what change looks like in 2016. Because right here in America are the very ideas, the very people who have swept our world into a radically different place than it was 2 decades ago. So, what would it look like if it was actually as easy to get student loans or veterans benefits as it is to order cat food to my house? What would it look like if there was an...
And she said, "Your dad and I are really worried about you." And I said, "What? I mean, what could it be at this point?" And she said, "I want you to be completely honest with me. Have you been voting for Republicans?" Now, the truth.
You sleep, or the things that people are interested in fascinate me, when instead what really was in my heart and was probably the most amazing experience I had was, again, this internal experience. I had these dreams, but living in that kind of despair, I let them begin to fade away. Have you ever felt hope?
And I might add, by the way, over half of us are women. So the best way to understand this strategy is actually to walk through a couple examples of how it's working out in the wild. So I'm going to give you 2 examples quickly.
Are the reasons. There are 5 reasons that 2 billion of our brothers and sisters have been pulled out of poverty since I was a kid. Number 1, globalization. Number 2, free trade. Number 3, property rights. Number 4, rule of law. Number 5, entrepreneurship. Now, what are you going to do? How are you going to express that? Where does this start? It starts here. You know, all of us in this room, we're blessed. We're blessed with people who listen to us. We're blessed with prosperity. We're blessed with leadership, right? When people hear us with a kind of unpredictable ideology.
And what's incredible is everybody is as eager and kind as they are intelligent. And I might add, by the way, over half of us are women. So the best way to understand this strategy is actually to walk through a couple examples.
Who are starving and need us today, those are distractions. We need to come together around the best ways to mitigate poverty using the best tools at our disposal, and that comes only when conservatives recognize that they need liberals in their obsession with poverty, and liberals need conservatives.
Tools and more power to, in addition to the way that the venues are marketing the work, that the companies can actually run alongside, and that the two campaigns can be integral, and that marketing is not a dirty word for artists. It's okay. Particularly contemporary dance companies are all struggling, apart from the larger companies, really are struggling to get big audiences in. And we're just trying to find ways to embrace more than just the dance communities to come and see work.
Final question from Bob.
Radio shows, TV shows are really happy for people to be on their smartphones at the same time as viewing and listening and consuming the product, whereas theatre is just straight away. It's like that. We didn't like that. We thought that that was kind of... Actually, what we need to do is these are people that we can talk to, and we had meetings with people who had given feedback, and somebody wrote an essay for us of all the things that we'd done wrong, which was fantastic because we just did them right next time. And we didn't wholeheartedly...
And your actions are stemming from these deeply ingrained reflexes rooted in a need to protect yourself and your side and to defeat the enemy. So now I'd like you to imagine playing a very different role, that of the scout. So the scouts...
There are times when you simply must stop thinking. Well, how do you do that? The first rule is don't try to. Because if you do, you will be like someone trying to make rough water smooth.
Or Asian or Native American, or they are young or old, whether they are gay or straight, whatever their faith, men, women, Americans with disabilities, we have to keep on uniting as one team, as one people, as one nation. That's what you have taught us. Most of those 20 vets taking their lives each day are not in the VA, but we know that when vets do get VA care, they're more likely to survive. So we need to get more vets connected to the VA. And when you have an urgent need for mental health care, you shouldn't have to wait days, you shouldn't have to wait. But as strong as you are, and nobody's stronger than our disabled vets, I know you didn't make this journey alone. You're here because of the love and support of your families and your caregivers and your neighbors and your communities and your fellow veterans.
Whereas so many Americans are stalled or have fallen backwards. Real family income hasn't moved. In fact, it's below where it was in 99 and 2000. So we do have a problem. It's a real problem because we are a 70% consumption economy. So we've got to get more growth going.
Our Marines are the world's only truly expeditionary force. We have the world's finest Coast Guard. We have the most capable fighting force in history, and we're going to keep it that way. And no.
The planet is one in which ideas are literalized through technology, through transformation, through all the things that mankind has done as a force of geology. So ideas matter. And so what are the ideas that you're going to spread into the world? What are you going to pay forward? What is the possibility? What are the good vibes? What are the grand visions that you are going
to find the schools that are right for you, or to get the support you need to succeed on campus, to make sure you don't get ripped off, to cap your student loans, to make sure you and your families get in-state tuition, which is true now in all 50 states. And so far, we have. And when 20 veterans a day are taking their own lives, that is a national tragedy. We all have to do better. Most of those 20 vets taking their lives each day are not in the VA, but we know that when vets do get VA care, they're more likely to survive. So we need to get.
They are planted in there and transform us from within. And now all of us are broadcasters, right? Programmers. We don't just passively take in, we produce and publish. And so it's up to us to get the kind of ideas out into the world that will spread mimetically and that will collectively upgrade mankind.
Black or white or Latino or Asian or Native American, or they are young or old, whether they are gay or straight, whatever their faith, men, women, Americans with disabilities, we have to keep on uniting as one team, as one people, as one nation. That's what you.
Certain gaps in skills and knowledge that are good for the overall economy. But I think there are three big problems that we have to address. One is just the human cost of those 11 million undocumented immigrants. I have met many, many of them. In fact, we all have, whether we acknowledge.
Multiplicity of emotions to which we are privy to in a safe setting. For example, watching a scary movie, going on a roller coaster ride, skydiving. Your brain is telling you danger. The adrenaline rush is the one of impending doom. And yet the fact that you know you're in a safe space allows you on a meta level to
take responsibility for their own security so that we are no longer engaged in a major ground war in Afghanistan. That is your legacy. And today we salute our forces serving there on a more limited mission, supporting Afghan forces, going after terrorists, because we must never allow Afghanistan to be used as a safe haven for.
Especially at the community level, what types of resources are we talking about?
So resources that support entrepreneurs are wide and varied. They can be financial resources, microlending programs, angel groups, venture capitalists who can help support the high growth entrepreneur, or they might be incubators.
Veterans who are physicians and nurses have been hired by community health centers. Cities and towns are hiring veterans as teachers and police officers, firefighters, and first responders, because we made it a priority in the federal government, hiring hundreds of thousands of veterans, including disabled veterans. Nearly 1 in 3 federal workers is now a veteran. I challenged America's companies to hire veterans. And then, in case they weren't listening to me, I sicked Jill and Michelle on them through joining forces, and companies now have hired or trained more than 1.2 million veterans and military spouses. So all told, we've cut veterans' unemployment by more than half, down to 4.2%, which is actually lower than the already low national average. And it's way down for post 9/11 veterans too. It's one of the reasons we've been able to help more than 3.6 million veterans buy or refinance a home of their own. So I'm going to keep saying to every company in America, if you want talent, if you want dedication, if you want to get the job done, then hire a vet. Hire a claims, and claims decisions are more accurate the first time. And on both these fronts, we're keeping at it. But as we all know, when veterans appeal a decision, you're put into an appeal system that right now is broken. And you shouldn't have to fight for years to get a straight answer. We've proposed major reforms, and I want to thank the DAV and all the other veterans groups for raising your voice on this. We've got to keep up the pressure. Congress needs to pass comprehensive reform of the claims appeals process, because if we don't fix the appeals process, even when we get the backlog down on the original claim, too many folks are waiting on the back end. We got to fix it, and we can. But we're going to have to push Congress. And I don't know if you've noticed, that's hard. Fourth, we've got to keep fighting for the dignity of every veteran. And that includes ending the tragedy, the travesty of veterans' homelessness. Now,
but it's worked in some places. What are the lessons we can learn from that? So I'm actually very excited about this, and I think we will get to 100% coverage. And I think we will do it by building on what people are now accepting by spending their own dollars and by our subsidies of those. And it is a much...
We don't like to seem like we don't know what we're talking about. So we would rather make something up or nod along quietly instead of learning to say 3 simple words. I don't know. It can be... We are really good at forming judgments of other people. We jump to conclusions based on how they look, how they sound, by their last name, whether or not they have tattoos or piercings, and certainly by the color of their skin. I'm guilty of it too. And you're trying to pick out someone by name alone. Or you meet a child that doesn't look like his or her caregiver. Take a breath. Challenge that assumption that just crept into your mind. And have the courage to ask.
And these paintings are, I think, deliberately inconclusive. They leave us in an ambiguous place, one step removed, wondering if we can ever cross the threshold and see the vision for ourselves.
Leaves are called leaves because we're supposed to leave them. So we harvest.
Now, there are some in Washington who want to shut them down. In fact, in the pledge they recently released, the Republican leadership is promising to scrap all the incentives for clean energy projects, including those currently underway, even with all the jobs and potential that they hold. This doesn't make sense for our economy. It doesn't make sense for Americans who are looking for jobs. And it doesn't make sense for our future. To go backwards and scrap these plans means handing the competitive edge to China and other nations. It means that we'll grow even more dependent on foreign oil. And at a time of economic hardship, it means foregoing jobs.
I want you all to pretend that you are participants in a study designed to stress you out. It's called the social stress test. You come into the laboratory and you're told you have to give a 5-minute impromptu speech on your personal weaknesses to a panel of expert evaluators.
It makes sense for Americans who are looking for jobs. And it doesn't make sense for our future. To go backwards and scrap these plans means handing the competitive edge to China and other nations. It means that we'll grow even more dependent on foreign oil. And at a time of economic hardship,
black hole eventually evaporates. And we're getting to the point now where we're getting very different insights than we had before about the behavior of black holes and quantum gravity by thinking about the problem from the perspective of what we now know about quantum computing. So I think that's going to be.
And of course, if people are less poor to begin with, they're less likely to get sick and less likely to remain sick for long periods of time. Here's lesson 10. Mass incarceration is a post-war on poverty phenomenon, and its effects are disproportionately concentrated in low-income communities of color.
But, and I hope you are expecting a but by now, but that wasn't true for everyone. People who spent time caring for others showed absolutely no stress-related increase in dying, 0. Caring created resilience.
Then you have 33% of people that are on your level. These become your friends, your peers. But the last 33% is what most people forget about. Those are people 10, 20 years ahead of you. They'll make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but that's what you want. And then remember, you don't want to make the mistake most people make with mentors, finding somebody just a little bit better than them. But some of the great mentors are no longer alive. Shakespeare, Darwin, Freud, Mahatma Gandhi. But if I told you all those people were in my house, they're going to be there this Saturday answering questions, magically I can make that happen. Would you show up at my house? Of course everybody would buy a plane ticket and end up in California.
Economic lives and are utterly unprepared for an emergency that suddenly increases their expenses or reduces their income. What are we doing to deal with that? And how do remedies directed at insecurity differ from our traditional remedies directed at poverty? Lesson 3 is this.
Right? And they asked the police, are you crazy? Are you arresting him? They're like, we didn't know who he was, and we found him crawling around the floors of stores. And they asked him, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I was just taking a tape measure and measuring how wide the aisles were, because I was trying to figure out if these Brazilians knew something that I didn't know. 7, and she said, Ty, I thought, if that's how women are in California, one day I'm going to move to California. And sure enough, she ended up in California. That's the story, part of the story of how my family ended up in California. And I'm from California. I flew here, took 20 hours to get here,
country, we are staking our claim to continued leadership in the new global economy. And we're putting Americans to work, producing clean, homegrown American energy that will help lower our reliance on foreign oil and protect our planet for future generations. Now, there are some in Washington who want to shut them down.
These questions are basically, I'm sort of punching you in the heart in a loving way and saying, this is your life. You have to be responsible. If you don't want to answer the questions and you want to blame everybody else, you're done before you start. But if your heart is open and your mind is open, greatness, because that's really what these 5 questions are about. Remember how it all started. What does Mike Vance, Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa, Walt Disney, right, Jack, what do they all have in common? They'd all answer these questions and they live by it every single day. Now notice if I would have asked, hey Mike, there's 7.2 billion people on the planet. How do they operate? And the answer to those questions are what absolutely rule.
it was 50 years ago, simply because there are so many more women in the labor force. And because we still live in a world in which women do the overwhelming majority of all unpaid care work, it is their earnings that suffer most. This is in part why female-headed families continue to be so much poorer than two.
The verbs are verbing all by themselves without a need to introduce nouns, I believe was the quote. This idea that matter acts, but there are no actors acting upon the action. The verbs are verbing all by themselves without a need to introduce nouns. Everything. Kinds of new exotic technologies that are allowing us to peer at the primary building blocks of matter for whatever reason. We're starting to find some really weird stuff. You know, Buckminster Fuller perhaps had it right when he said God is a verb. You know, there's an amazing article by Kevin Kelly called The Fifth. There are no actors acting upon the action. The verbs are verbing all by themselves without a need to introduce nouns. Everything is signal. Everything is information. Perhaps there lies the mystery of consciousness, you know? But I just think it's a... You know, we human beings, we are a curious bunch, right? We want to look up God's skirt. And increasingly, you know, through either our understanding of quantum mechanics and all kinds of new exotic technologies that are allowing us to peer at the primary building blocks of matter for whatever reason.
Now, of course, we are both things, but the consequence of this is you get two kinds of political theory. One that begins with society. And then once we analyze society, we'll tell you what you can do. And not saying that we're born as individuals, you know, out of the head of a god, but rather that the moment we reach maturity, we're able to act freely. And we are able to make decisions and live for ourselves in some way, who are focused on the nature of history instead. Mind are actually mirror images of each other. The revolutionary has a theory of history, and the theory of history is that at a certain moment there will be a break in history, everything will change, and then it will get better. The reactionary has this idea that but rather that the moment we reach maturity, we're able to act freely. And we are able to make decisions and live for ourselves in some way, and ought to have the right to do that. And so a liberal view, and we are able to make decisions and live for ourselves in some way, and ought to have the right to do that. And so a liberal view stresses the possibility of individual freedom and the power of the... So those are two different views of human nature and the nature of human society, as opposed to reactionaries and revolutionaries who are focused on the nature of history instead.
But we're managing it in a way that makes sure that Americans are safe and that our interests are secured. And if we can make progress in restoring, means that there are a whole lot of Toyotas sold here and almost no Fords or Chryslers sold in Japan. But what I say to them is, if in fact the current situation disadvantages us, Why would we want to stick with the current situation? Now, sometimes the response will be, well, what you're... But there are also some big problems like Central America where with a relatively modest investment, we could really be making a difference and making ourselves safer.
So there's been this idea of a pivot to Asia.
Yeah.
And what does that mean to you in specific terms? A transfer of hard...
And maybe I'll close with that point because that's been an issue of great interest. People are right to be suspicious of Iran. Iran has sponsored state terrorism. It has consistently at the highest levels made deplorable anti-Israeli statements. Thick and thin. Then you've got all these smaller countries or countries that are developing and are coming into their own in the Southeast Asia. What we see there is this enormous hunger for engagement from America. They want to do more business with us. They want to have more defense cooperation. Organized factions are intolerant, religious sects. Progress is going to be happening in steps as opposed to in one big leap, and that's I think the goal of a realistic view that there are bad people out there who are trying to do us harm, and we've got to have the strongest military in the world, and we occasionally have to twist the arms of countries that wouldn't do what we need them to do if it weren't for the various economic or diplomatic or in some cases military. All these things are areas where we've made an enormous investment and there have been significant payoffs.
So you mentioned the Philippines and earlier the idea that there are sort of big gains potentially to be made by giving some assistance to Central America.
Yeah.
And does it really make sense to have
a country like Vietnam for the first time recognizes labor rights and those are enforceable? That's a big deal. It doesn't mean that we're still not going to see wage differentials between us and them, but they're already selling here for the most part. And what we have the opportunity to do is to set a long-term to lessen those tensions and to lift up voices that are less prone to exploit those sectarian divides. But we're not going to eliminate that stuff overnight. The trend towards extremism among a small segment of better for American workers and American businesses that are trying to export there. I can open up more markets than we have open right now so that American farmers can sell their goods there. Better is better. It's not perfect.
when there are these other democratic allies in other regions of the world that seem maybe more in need of assistance?
Well, our relationship with Israel in many ways is unique. It's our strongest ally in the region. Our people-to-people ties are unmatched, and partly because of... But the second reason it's important is because the countries we're negotiating with are the same countries that China's trying to negotiate with. If we don't write the rules out there, China's going to write the rules. And the geopolitical implications of China writing the rules for trade or opportunities that are out there. And that, I think, has been the real challenge over the last 6 to 8 years.
So in the Middle East, where we're still very much engaged, despite the drawdown from Iraq, the Clinton administration had a policy they called dual containment of Iraq and Iran. The Bush administration.
There may be some technical arguments, in part because there are some who will only be satisfied with the Iranian regime being replaced. They don't even like the idea of Iran having any nuclear technology or again. So what I said was, Iraqis have to show us that they are prepared to put together a functioning government, that they reach out to the Kurds and the Sunnis, and that they're credibly willing to fight on the ground. And if they do those things, then we